and the person that you're talking to doesn't want it, what do? And this is where an initiative comes in. You draft a bill, and then you collect signatures from registered voters, and then you submit this to the Board of Elections so that they can verify the signatures. And when they verify, it usually takes about 3, maybe 5% of the voters. Then at that point, this ends up on the ballot, and if a majority votes yes, it becomes law, and if a majority votes no, then it is killed. And see, what's nice about this is, you drafted the bill, you collected the signatures, you got a majority of people to vote yes, and then it became law because of your actions, so there's no politicians. That's a really good example of direct democracy. So that's what that was. You remember what the recall was? Go ahead.
It's like if someone's in a position and you want to they're in, I don't know, they're like president or something.
Okay.
And you want, or I don't know, governor. And
Okay, let's go with the governor.
Governor, yeah. And you want to get them out of that. You want to get them out of that position, and you have like a list of people who, if they can get enough votes, they can take that position.
Yeah, how do you start this process? Why would it be direct democracy? Go ahead.
Because aren't you getting like signatures to initiate like a recall?
You are. A recall is like on a car. You know, if there's a bad part on a car, a company will issue a recall, and then you go in and they will take away that bad part and they will replace it for free. A political recall is like Jerome said with the governor. To your point, Big D, if you draft a recall petition, basically saying, I want to remove or recall Governor Jerome, you would collect 3 to 5% of registered voters' signatures, and then the State Board of Elections would verify it, and then at that point there would be a special election specifically dealing with Governor Jerome. And if a majority of people vote no, because the question is, do you want to recall Governor Jerome? If a majority of people say no, he keeps his office and that's it. But if a majority of people say yes, then the second question comes in, who do you want to replace him? And do you remember the election that we talked about an awful lot with the initiative? Schwarzenegger. Do you remember any of the people that got on that ballot? Because all they had to do was collect 3 to 5% of registered voters as well.
There were adult actresses.
Adult actresses.
Well, adult movie actresses.
Adult movie actresses.
Porn stars.
Porn stars, thank you. Yeah, there was a porn star on there. Mary Carey Cook, if you remember. Yeah. Anybody else you can remember?
A college student.
A college student. Yeah, that's not the sexiest example, but I'm sure there was a college student on there. There was a stripper on there. There was a porn star that was on there. Somebody who may or may not have been Richard Simmons, the exercise guy.
Yeah.
Gary Coleman was on there. Go ahead, Ms. Motowala.
Oh, I just want to ask, so
Goodwin.
as for the definition for initiative, can we say the ability to assess and initiate things independently, political-wise?
I guess you can, but make sure that you have the process on there. So you drafted it, you got the signatures, the signatures were verified, and then a majority passed it. So that's a good opening sentence, but make sure you can explain the process.
And as for the examples of direct democracy, we can say referendum and initiative.
Yes, and recall is one too, because remember with recall, you draft the petition that you want to recall the governor, you collect the signatures, and then ultimately we the people get to vote yes or no. Getting back to it before we forget, there were like sumo wrestlers on the ballot. I mean, the beauty of democracy is that anybody could run for office. And then I showed you some of the people that tried to run for office on that California ballot, and y'all were all of a sudden like, I'm not sure that I want everybody to be able to run. Go ahead, Millie.
A recall, it can be also for the presidents.
Not for the president. There's not a federal recall, but some states
So
have it
it's
for.
It's a state recall.
There is a state recall in many states for like governor. Maybe some places have it for mayor, but it's for state officials. There's not a federal recall, so you couldn't recall Trump.
I got my answer.
Okay. All right. Anything else that jumps out up here from chapter 1? Just to make sure. Yes.
So we are just looking the buffer zone as an article in chapter 1 and nothing else.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's it?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
For John Locke, we pretty much just need to know political science and life, liberty, and property.
You
And
know,
social contract, social
I think for
contract.
John Locke, what we said on the tape before is what we need. And since
Okay.
we spent time on that, it's on the tape now.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions from chapter 1? Okay, let me go back to the articles and just to take a look at some of these to make sure that you're clean on these. We talked about Catholic school teacher very early. We spent a good chunk of time on that, and then there is already a video up there about Michelle McCusker. Y'all know the story of the Catholic school teacher, correct? Make sure, I mean, you've got the ability to get that. Y'all remember gun drawing?
Well,
What was gun drawing?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
A guy
Guy.
drawing water gun,
Yeah.
shooting at David. No.
Shooting at David. Okay, go ahead, Miss Matavala.
It was between two kindergartners. One was drawing a gun, as he says, and like he drew like it's not even it's like a sketch figure, not like an actual person.
Yeah.
Like shooting his friend in the sense like he wrote his friend's name and then he gave it to the friend. Friend's mom figured it out and then she took it to the level where she involved the officials and the other.
Okay, let's stop right there. So Kyle Walker is this 7-year-old kid that drew a stick figure. And 2 stick figures, and one of them was shooting the other one with a gun. And not only did Kyle like draw the picture, but Kyle gave this picture to another student, 7-year-old, that was getting on the bus. Now, how did that student know that it was them in the picture?
Because he had his name there.
He had me for Kyle Walker shooting the gun, and then he had the other student's name over the person getting shot. And then this person's mom saw this picture and felt like her child was getting threatened. And if you remember when we talked about this, some of y'all felt like this was a threat. Some of y'all felt like just let the kids draw, let kids be kids kind of a thing. What ultimately ended up happening, and actually, what was zero tolerance?
Zero
guns.
tolerance.
never
Gun pause.
whatsoever.
No guns. So if you brought a real gun to school, you could get in trouble. If you brought a toy gun to school, you could get into trouble. If you made gun fingers, you could get in trouble. Or if you drew a gun picture, which is what was done here. And New Jersey's basically saying zero tolerance on guns. If we teach you this early enough, then you're not going to be likely to go out and start committing school shootings and things like this. What happened to Kyle Walker? Natalia said that he admitted that this was a water gun, so it really wasn't supposed to be a threat. How was he punished?
Suspended for 1 day.
He was suspended for 1 day, and he was also required to undergo counseling for this. Suspended and counseling. You'll notice in here with this article, there are several things up here, these text and MySpace things, they're not on the text. Y'all remember Ladies' Night, though?
Yeah.
What was Ladies' Night? How's it going on time? Is it? Okay, good. Ladies' Night.
I think I read this.
Go ahead.
It was about bars discriminating against men, or the accusation that they were discriminating against men.
What is Ladies' Night?
For having a ladies' night, which is reduced price for either entry or individual drinks for females.
Ladies' Night at bars is typically designed to get an awful lot of women into the clubs. And you're right, it would be free or reduced price drinks, or maybe some combination of reduced price drinks and maybe no cover charge, something along these lines. And the idea is, for business purposes, is that if you get 100 women into a bar, you're probably going to get like 400 men in there to be around the women. Well, understand on this, it was designed to be a business thing, but this guy in New York, what did he say? Talking about discrimination.
Yeah, I don't remember.
He said you're basically discriminating because if the only difference between Big D and Natalia is gender, and you're going to treat Natalia a better way than Big D just because of gender, that's discrimination. And you notice up here, he said it's time for Ladies' Night to join segregation and slavery in the dustbin of civil rights history. And y'all didn't really like that. Many of y'all didn't when we were talking about this. Did he win in this case? Did he lose? He lost in the New York case. And basically what they said in this was, they said, listen, they said, you know, if you want a man's night for free drinks, there are bars in New York City that you can go to that will provide this. So it's not discrimination. This is something that's about business. However, a few years later, in Minnesota, they did the same thing, and they did strike it down. And the logic was that if the state grants an alcohol license, and then the bars use the alcohol license to treat Natalia as a female one way and Big D another way as a guy, that is now state-endorsed discrimination. And they said, no, you can't do that. So going forward, it's looking like Ladies' Night is getting struck down if people complain. But you notice in italics it says, yeah, the Tavern Association said, men like Ladies' Night, because you're going to have so many females that are going to be in the bar. These, like I said, focus on the articles that we went over. Some of them, obviously, we didn't. You look at these quotes up here. Don't blow these off, because these are going to be quotes. I'll use one that's upright. These are going to be quotes that I read in class. You'll notice up here, at the state, federal, and local level, government provides stability and security not only in the form of military, but in the form of police and fire. Government provides other valuable goods and services such as education, transportation, mail, and food, housing, and health care for the poor. We were talking about if you trusted government or not to do certain things. That's what we were talking about with this. So make sure that you're familiar with the quotes that are in there. Do y'all remember Starbucks?
Yep.
Yeah.
What happened in Starbucks?
2 African American men got kicked out after being there for a couple of minutes by the lady manager or the Caucasian manager.
They got arrested.
They
didn't
got
they?
arrested. No,
They
they
weren't
got
kicked out, they
arrested.
wouldn't leave.
By a bike cop or something. Right?
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, there's a video for this too, so maybe take a look at that.
Yeah.
But if you remember on this, these two guys went in, and I think first they asked to use the restroom, but they weren't purchasing anything, and they were told no. And then they went and sat down, and they still hadn't bought anything. And if you remember, the manager came over and was like, hey, what's going on? And they said, we're waiting for a business associate. And ultimately they're like, listen, you need to buy something or you're going to have to go. And they did, refuse to leave. And it was at this point that manager called the police. And you're right, there was a bike cop that was in the video. But if you remember on this, they were ultimately arrested. I think they were detained for about 8 hours. And the fight that we had in class was, this is a business. They were asked to leave. They didn't leave. This seems like this is problematic. And then there was, of course, the debate that's like, well, wait a minute. These are a couple of African-American males. They were asked to leave. This got blown way out of proportion. They were treated differently, in fact, because of who? Because of what they were. Do you remember what Starbucks did with this?
They had racial profiling.
Training.
They did. They had a sensitivity training where they closed down many of the stores right about the time of summer school last year. And when they closed them down, they went through some sensitivity training. I think they had also given these guys some grants for business, not for their own personal business, but ultimately to be able to help other people do some business type activities. So these guys didn't get like coffee for life. And they also got, maybe most importantly, an apology from the CEO of Starbucks. So look this one over.
So they won.
They did, yeah, they did. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
The manager was fired.
And the manager was ultimately fired on this as well.
Wait, so they won, the manager got fired, they got a grant for what was
There
it?
were some grants so that they could help other people in business, and then,
We don't need to know what they specifically did.
no.
Okay.
Y'all remember Harry Tubman?
Yeah.
What was Harry Tubman?
Changing the 20 to a picture of Harry Tubman rather than, is it Jackson?
Yeah, the idea is I think it's in 2020, Harriet Tubman is supposed to be put on the $20 bill, and they're going to remove Andrew Jackson from the front, and they're going to put a smaller rendition of Andrew Jackson on the back. And if you remember this day when we were talking about this, we had discussed a little bit about diversity on money. And it's really, really funny because y'all get angry about this. A number of y'all were like, hey, if it's only pale, male, and stale, old, wealthy white guys on the money, there's a lot more than pale, male, and stale that live in the country. Others of y'all said, I don't really give a damn who's on my money as long as my money spends. And there was a real big divide on this. And if you remember, I had brought in a number of different coins and things like that, some of them with different genders or different races on them, just to talk about how some of these things were out there. And we talked a little bit about how money can socialize or maybe, I don't know, a little bit more inclusive, you could argue. And others said, no, I just want it to spend. Go ahead.
This one, they said that they wanted her on the $2 bill.
Who said that?
Uh,
Trump did. President Trump said we don't need to put her on the 20, let's put her on the 2. Of course, the idea of putting a black woman on the $2 bill that isn't used is really kind of an insult when you think about it, whereas the $20 bill, you know, every time you go to an ATM, you get those out. Seems like that could socialize more, or if people saw different people, maybe they would want to know who was on their money, so it would kind of socialize that way.
Who is that black woman?
Excuse me?
Black woman?
Harriet Tubman. And Harriet Tubman, why was she kind of significant, especially for y'all?